The unseen weight of kindness. Tom's alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., a sound that felt more like a warning than a wake-up call. With a groan, he swung his legs off the worn mattress, the cold wooden floor sending a shiver up his spine. His one-bedroom apartment was modest at best, cramped walls, and second-hand furniture. But he had done his best to make it a home for his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. She was still curled up in bed, a mess of golden curls peeking out from beneath the blanket. He shuffled to the kitchen, eyeing the nearly empty pantry, a box of cereal, and a carton of milk, barely enough to get through the day. Tom sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. His mechanic job at the local auto shop paid enough to keep the lights on, but not much else. The weight of unpaid bills sat heavy in his mind, a constant reminder of how close he was to losing everything. "Daddy." Lily's voice broke his thoughts. She appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes with one hand and clutching her tattered stuffed rabbit with the other. "Morning, sweetheart," Tom said, forcing a smile. "Cereal okay for breakfast?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, her optimism a stark contrast to the bleakness Tom felt. He poured her a bowl, watching her eat with the innocent joy of a child unaware of life's struggles. It gave him a momentary sense of relief. After breakfast, Tom bundled her up in a second-hand coat and walked her to the bus stop. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot as they waited. "Be good today, okay?" he said, kneeling to adjust her scarf. "I will, Daddy," Lily said with a big smile. She waved from the bus window as it pulled away, her face glowing with excitement. Tom watched until the bus disappeared, then climbed into his old truck. It sputtered to life, the engine groaning in protest. "Come on, Betsy," he muttered, coaxing the vehicle into motion. The drive to the shop was uneventful, the same routine he followed every day, until he spotted a sleek black sedan on the side of the road, steam billowing from under the hood. A woman stood next to the car, pacing with her phone in hand. Her designer coat and polished boots were out of place in this rural town, making her frustration all the more apparent. Tom hesitated for a moment, then pulled over. His father had always taught him to help when he could, even when it wasn't convenient. "Need some help?" he called, stepping out of his truck. The woman turned, relief flashing across her face. "Yes, thank you. I think it's overheated, but I have no idea what to do." Tom approached cautiously, toolbox in hand. "Let's take a look. Name's Tom, by the way." "Grace," she replied, her voice calmer now. "I don't usually drive out here, but I had a meeting nearby. Guess my car decided it wasn't a fan of small-town life." Tom chuckled, kneeling by the engine. He worked in silence, his experienced hands moving swiftly. It didn't take long to identify the problem. A loose belt causing the overheating. "Good news," he said, standing up. "It's nothing serious. I can fix it if you've got some time." "Really?" Grace looked at him, her gratitude evident. "That would be amazing. I was about to call for a tow." "No need for that," Tom said. "Follow me to the shop. It won't take more than an hour." Grace hesitated, then nodded. She climbed into his truck while he drove her car carefully to the garage. Once there, Tom got to work immediately, pulling parts and tools from the shelves. Grace watched him curiously, noting the worn patches on his jacket and the grease-stained fingers that moved with practiced precision. "You're good at this," she said after a while. "How long have you been a mechanic?" "Feels like forever," Tom replied without looking up. "Picked it up from my dad when I was a kid. It's been my trade ever since." "Do you enjoy it?" Tom paused, considering her question. "It's honest work," he said finally. "It pays the bills. Most of the time." Grace's eyes lingered on him, sensing there was more to his story. She decided to change the subject. "You mentioned you have a daughter." Tom's expression softened. "Lily. She's my world. 7 years old and already smarter than me." Grace smiled at his tone, noting the pride mixed with exhaustion. "She's lucky to have a dad like you." "Thanks," Tom said, returning his focus to the car. He didn't elaborate, and Grace didn't press. She sensed his pride wouldn't let him share more. An hour later, the car roared back to life. "All set," Tom said, stepping back. "Shouldn't give you any more trouble." Grace reached for her purse, then froze. "Oh no, I don't have any cash on me. Can I write you a check?" Tom shook his head. "Don't worry about it. Glad I could help." "No, really," Grace insisted. "You went out of your way." "A thank you is enough," Tom said, his tone firm but kind. Grace hesitated, clearly uncomfortable leaving without compensating him. "At least let me send you something," she said. "Do you have a card or anything?" Tom tore a scrap of paper from an old notepad and scribbled down the shop's address. "If it makes you feel better," he said, handing it to her. "But really, it's no big deal." Grace tucked the paper into her pocket, her expression a mix of gratitude and determination. "Thank you, Tom. Truly." As she drove away, Tom returned to his routine, pushing the encounter to the back of his mind. Acts of kindness were part of who he was, even if life hadn't been particularly kind to him. What Tom didn't know was that Grace wasn't done showing her gratitude. Her curiosity about the kind-hearted mechanic was growing, and she had plans that would soon change both their lives forever. A surprise visit. It had been a week since Tom had helped Grace with her car, and life had settled back into its usual rhythm. The garage was as busy as ever, and Tom was juggling jobs to keep up. The days were long, the pay was meager, and the weight of overdue bills loomed over him like a dark cloud. But Tom didn't complain. For Lily, he would endure anything. The chill of late autumn had set in, and Tom found himself spending more time fixing the shop's ancient radiator than actual cars. He was in the middle of tightening a bolt on the contraption when he heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside. Visitors weren't uncommon, but this was different. The engine was too smooth, the car too polished. Tom wiped his hands on a rag and walked to the front curious. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Grace stepping out of a modest rental car, holding a covered dish in her hands. She was dressed casually this time, jeans and a thick sweater, but her presence still felt out of place in the dusty shop. "Grace," Tom said, his tone a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Didn't expect to see you again. Everything okay with the car?" "Running like a dream," Grace replied with a warm smile. She held up the dish. "I didn't come for repairs. I came to say thank you." Tom blinked, caught off guard. "What's that?" "It's a pie," she said with a laugh. "Apple, my grandmother's recipe. I figured you and your daughter might enjoy it." Tom scratched the back of his neck, feeling a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. "You didn't have to do that." "It's not trouble," Grace said, her tone firm but kind. "You helped me when I was stranded, and you didn't ask for anything in return. That kind of kindness deserves to be appreciated." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Well, thank you. Lily's got a sweet tooth, so I'm sure she'll love it." "Good," Grace said, handing him the dish. She glanced around the shop, taking in the cluttered workspace and the faint smell of oil. "Is this where you spend most of your time?" "Pretty much," Tom admitted. "Keeps the bills paid." Grace tilted her head, studying him. "Do you enjoy it?" Tom chuckled softly. "It's not about enjoyment. It's about survival. The shop's not glamorous, but it puts food on the table." Grace's expression softened. "And your daughter? She seems like a bright kid." "She's my everything," Tom said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Smart, funny, full of energy. She doesn't know how tough things are, and I want to keep it that way." Grace nodded, sensing the depth of his dedication. "She's lucky to have you." "Thanks," Tom said quietly. I wish I could give her more, you know. A better house, new clothes, a life where she doesn't have to see her dad working himself to the bone every day." Grace didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at him thoughtfully. "You're doing more than you think," she said finally. "You're giving her stability, love, and a role model. That's worth more than any material thing. Tom met her gaze, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Thanks," he said after a moment. "That means a lot." Grace smiled, then glanced at her watch. "I should get going. I just wanted to drop this off and say thank you again." "You didn't have to, but I appreciate it," Tom said, walking her to her car. "Drive safe." Grace nodded, climbing into the driver's seat. "Take care, Tom. And tell Lily I hope she enjoys the pie." "I will," Tom said, watching as she drove away. For a moment, he stood there, feeling a strange sense of comfort. Her visit had been brief, but it left a warmth that lingered long after she was gone. Later that evening, Tom set the pie on the kitchen counter as Lily bounded in from the living room. Her eyes lit up at the sight of it. "Who made that, Daddy?" she asked, already reaching for a plate. "A nice lady named Grace," Tom said, cutting her a slice. "She wanted to say thank you for something I helped her with." Lily took a bite, her eyes widening. "This is the best pie ever." Tom chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Glad you like it." As Lily devoured her slice, Tom found himself thinking about Grace again. She seemed out of place in their small town, like she belonged somewhere bigger. But there was something about her that felt grounded, genuine. He didn't expect to see her again, but he hoped she was doing well. The following week, Tom was in the middle of changing a tire when he heard the sound of a familiar engine pulling into the lot. He turned, surprised to see Grace stepping out of her car again. This time, she wasn't holding a pie. "Grace," Tom said, his tone laced with curiosity. "Back so soon? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Grace said with a smile. "I just wanted to talk." Tom frowned, wiping his hands on a rag. "Talk about what?" Grace hesitated, then gestured toward the small office attached to the shop. "Do you have a minute?" Tom nodded, leading her inside. The office was small and cluttered, with mismatched chairs and a coffee maker that looked older than both of them. Grace didn't seem to mind. She took a seat, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "What's on your mind?" Tom asked, leaning against the desk. Grace smiled, her tone casual but probing. "I was curious about you, how someone so skilled and hardworking ended up here." Tom blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you clearly know your way around cars. Have you ever thought about doing something bigger? Running your own shop, maybe?" Tom chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Bigger takes money, Grace. And money's something I don't have." Grace tilted her head, studying him. "Is it just you and Lily?" "Yeah," Tom said, his voice quiet. "Her mom. Well, she left a long time ago. It's been just the two of us ever since." Grace's expression softened. "That must be hard." "It is," Tom admitted. "But she's worth it. Every late night, every sacrifice. It's all for her." For a moment, Grace was silent, as if weighing her next words carefully. "You know," she said finally, "I wasn't always in a position to bake pies and drive nice cars." Tom looked at her, surprised by the admission. "Really?" Grace nodded. "I grew up in a small town not unlike this one. My parents worked hard, but money was always tight. I know what it's like to worry about bills, to feel like you're barely keeping your head above water. That's why I try to help people when I can." Tom didn't know what to say. He hadn't expected her to open up like this, to reveal a side of herself that felt so relatable. "That's kind of you," he said at last. Grace smiled faintly. "It's not kindness, really. It's gratitude. I've been where you are, Tom, and I know how hard it is. But I also know how much a little help can mean." She stood, smoothing her coat. "I should get going," she said, her tone lightening. "But before I do, can I leave something for you?" Tom frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a plain white envelope. "Just something to say thank you again. I know you said you didn't want payment, but I insist." Tom hesitated, his pride warring with practicality. "Grace, you don't have to." I know I don't have to, she interrupted gently, but I want to. She placed the envelope on the desk, then extended her hand. Thank you again, Tom, for everything. Tom shook her hand, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and unease. You're welcome. And thank you. Grace smiled, then walked out, leaving Tom staring at the envelope on his desk. He debated leaving it unopened, his pride whispering that he didn't need charity. But curiosity got the better of him. When he finally opened it, his breath caught in his throat. Inside was a check for $10,000, along with a handwritten note that would change his life forever. The gift that changed everything. Tom sat at his kitchen table, staring at the check in his hands. The weight of it pressed against his chest like a stone. $10,000. It felt like a dream, one too good to be true. He read Grace's handwritten note again, her neat cursive dancing across the paper. Tom, your kindness and hard work deserve more than a simple thank you. I own a small chain of auto repair shops, and I believe in investing in people like you, people who don't just work hard, but have heart. This check is to help you get back on your feet and make the future a little less daunting. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a job at one of my shops. It's not charity, Tom. It's an opportunity. Call me when you're ready. Grace. Tom leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He hadn't told Lily about the check yet, and part of him wasn't sure he would. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't know how to explain something that felt so unbelievable. The logical part of his mind screamed at him to accept. This money could catch him up on rent, pay off lingering bills, and even leave room for things he hadn't dared to dream about, like replacing the worn tires on his truck or buying Lily a proper winter coat. But his pride wrestled with the idea of taking something he hadn't earned. He folded the check carefully and set it back in the envelope, resolving to sleep on it. Maybe clarity would come in the morning. The next day was business as usual. Tom dropped Lily off at school, her laughter and boundless energy momentarily lifting the cloud of worry that hung over him. The garage was busy, as it always was, and Tom threw himself into his work, hoping the hum of engines and the clatter of tools would drown out his swirling thoughts. By lunchtime, he still hadn't made a decision. He hadn't even touched his sandwich, his appetite dulled by the weight of Grace's offer. He'd thought about calling her a dozen times but always hung up before it could ring. It was mid-afternoon when a familiar black sedan pulled into the lot. Tom wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, his heart racing when he saw Grace climb out of the car. She was dressed sharply again, a tailored coat and scarf keeping the autumn chill at bay. Grace, Tom said, his voice a mix of surprise and unease. Wasn't expecting you. She smiled warmly. I figured you wouldn't call, so I decided to stop by. Tom felt his cheeks flush. I was going to. Grace waved him off. No pressure, Tom. I just wanted to check in. Did you read the note? I did, he admitted, his voice quieter now. And I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Grace said, leaning against her car. But if you're worried about accepting help, let me make something clear. This isn't charity. It's a way to say thank you and give you a chance to use your talents somewhere you'll be appreciated. Tom hesitated, his pride and practicality waging war. I don't know if I can take the money. It feels, I don't know, wrong. Grace tilted her head, studying him with a mix of patience and understanding. Then don't think of it as a gift. Think of it as an investment. You're not just a great mechanic, Tom. You're the kind of person people trust. That's rare, and it's worth supporting. Her words struck a chord, loosening the knot of doubt in his chest. You really think I can do it? Work at one of your shops, I mean. Grace nodded without hesitation. I know you can. The question is, do you? Tom exhaled deeply, the weight of her beliefs settling over him. I don't want to let Lily down, he said finally. If this can give her a better life, I'll do it. Grace smiled, her eyes shining with something that looked like pride. Then we'll make it happen. The offer's open-ended, but the sooner you start, the better. Over the next few days, Tom prepared himself for the change. He used part of the money to catch up on overdue rent and bills, finally pulling himself out of the financial quicksand that had consumed him for years. He bought Lily a new winter coat and boots, her delighted laughter reminding him why he was doing all of this. The most nerve-wracking part came when Grace arranged for him to visit one of her shops in a neighboring town. It was bigger, busier, and far more advanced than the modest garage he was used to. Tom was overwhelmed at first, but the staff welcomed him warmly, and he quickly found his rhythm. His skills as a mechanic shone, and his natural ability to connect with people made him a favorite among the customers. For the first time in years, Tom felt like he was more than just surviving. He was thriving. A month later, Tom sat at the kitchen table, watching Lily color in a new activity book he bought her. The house felt warmer, both literally and figuratively. The broken heater had been replaced, and the glow of the Christmas lights they'd strung up together filled the room with a cozy light. "Daddy," Lily said, looking up from her drawing, "do you think the nice pie lady will come visit again?" Tom smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Maybe," he said. "And maybe we'll invite her over for dinner this time. What do you think?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Yes, and we can make her a pie." Tom chuckled, ruffling her hair. "I think she'd like that." As he watched Lily return to her coloring, Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude. Grace's generosity hadn't just changed his circumstances, it had changed his perspective. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about the future. And he knew that if he ever had the chance, he would pay her kindness forward. A new beginning. The days had turned colder as December rolled in, painting the town in shades of frost and gray. Tom's life, however, had begun to feel brighter. The small chain of repair shops owned by Grace was unlike anything he had worked in before. The facilities were modern, the tools were state-of-the-art, and most importantly, the staff worked like a team, not just individuals clocking in and out. Tom had been commuting to the nearest shop for 2 weeks now, and though the drive was longer than he was used to, he didn't mind. The pay was better, the hours more reasonable, and he no longer had to juggle bills on the kitchen table, hoping something wouldn't bounce. "Morning, Tom," called Bill, the shop's senior mechanic, as Tom walked in one crisp morning. "Morning, Bill," Tom replied, setting down his coffee and rolling up his sleeves. He felt more at ease here than he ever had at his old job. The people were kind, the work challenging but rewarding. For the first time in years, Tom didn't dread going to work. The day passed quickly, as it often did when Tom was busy. By the afternoon, he was elbow-deep in the engine of a sleek sports car, troubleshooting a wiring issue. He hadn't noticed Grace walk in until she was standing just behind him. "Looks like you're settling in nicely," she said, her voice carrying a warm note of approval. Tom startled slightly, then chuckled. "Grace, didn't hear you come in." She smiled. "I like to check in on the shops now and then, make sure everything's running smoothly." Tom nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, this place runs like a well-oiled machine. It's different, in a good way." "I'm glad to hear that," Grace said. She hesitated for a moment, then added, "And you? How are you adjusting?" Tom considered her question, his expression softening. "Better than I thought I would. It's been a long time since I'd felt this stable. Feels strange, honestly, but in a good way." Grace nodded, her eyes scanning the shop floor. "You know, I had a feeling about you, Tom. When we first met, you reminded me of someone I used to know. My dad. He was a mechanic, too. Hardworking, honest, always helping others even when he didn't have much himself." Tom looked at her, surprised by the personal revelation. "Your dad was a mechanic?" She smiled faintly. "He was. We didn't have much growing up, but he made sure I knew the value of hard work. Watching him fix cars, help neighbors, and still find time for me, it stuck with me." "That's a lot like how I try to be with Lily," Tom admitted. I don't want her to see how tough things can be. I just want her to know she's loved." Grace nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And that's why I wanted to help you, Tom. I see that same determination in you. It's rare, and it's worth investing in." Tom felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing such genuine praise, especially from someone like Grace. "I don't know how to thank you," he said finally, "for everything. The job, the check. It's changed everything for me and Lily." "You don't need to thank me," Grace said softly. "Just keep being the man you are. That's thanks enough." Later that evening, Tom found himself reflecting on Grace's words as he drove home. The glow of Christmas lights twinkled in windows as he passed, and for once, he didn't feel the pang of envy he usually did this time of year. His own home might be modest, but it was filled with warmth, love, and the laughter of his daughter. When he walked through the door, Lily came running to greet him, her face lighting up with excitement. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up a glittery construction paper ornament, her grin stretching from ear to ear. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Tom said, kneeling to admire her handiwork. "You're getting better at this every day." "Can we put it on the tree?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "Of course," Tom said, lifting her up so she could place the ornament on a high branch. As she carefully hooked it onto the tree, Tom felt a swell of pride. For all the struggles they had faced, moments like this made it all worthwhile. The following weekend, Grace stopped by the shop again, this time with a proposition. She waited until the end of Tom's shift to approach him. "Tom, do you have a minute?" she asked, her tone professional yet warm. "Sure," Tom said, setting down his tools. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," Grace began, "about how we can take this opportunity further. You've proven yourself here, not just as a skilled mechanic, but as someone people trust. I think you're ready for more responsibility." Tom frowned slightly, unsure of where this was going. "More responsibility?" Grace nodded. "I'd like to train you to manage one of my shops. It's a step up, higher pay, more leadership responsibilities. It won't be easy, but I think you're more than capable." Tom blinked, her words taking a moment to sink in. "Manage a shop? Grace, I don't even have experience running a place like this." "You'll learn," she said confidently. "I'll make sure of it. I wouldn't offer this if I didn't believe in you, Tom. This is your chance to build something not just for yourself, but for Lily too." Tom hesitated, his mind racing. The thought of taking on such a role was daunting, but it was also exciting. He thought of Lily, of the future he wanted to give her, and of the faith Grace had shown in him. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do it." Grace smiled, extending her hand. "You won't regret it." Tom shook her hand, feeling a surge of determination. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the brink of something truly life-changing. That night, Tom sat at the kitchen table, watching Lily decorate cookies with a focus that was both admirable and impressive. He thought about everything that had happened since that fateful day on the side of the road. Grace's unexpected gratitude had set off a chain of events that had transformed his life, opening doors he hadn't even known were there. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice pulling him from his thoughts, "do you think we can invite the nice pie lady for Christmas dinner?" Tom smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I think that's a great idea, sweetheart. Let's make it happen." As he watched Lily carefully place sprinkles on a cookie, Tom felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. And he knew, without a doubt, that their best days were still ahead. The road to something greater. The days leading up to Christmas were a flurry of activity for Tom. Between learning the ropes of managing a shop and preparing for the holidays, his schedule was packed. Grace had wasted no time in beginning his training, and Tom quickly found himself immersed in responsibilities he never had before: inventory management, customer service strategies, even staff scheduling. It was a lot to take in, but for the first time in his life, Tom didn't feel like he was merely treading water. He was moving forward. One cold December morning, Grace arrived at the shop with a stack of binders and a warm smile. "Hope you had your coffee," she said, setting the binders down on the counter. "Today we're diving into shop finances." Tom raised an eyebrow, a little intimidated by the sight of so much paperwork. "Finances, huh? That's new territory for me." Grace chuckled. "It's not as scary as it looks. Besides, you're a quick learner. You've got this." The hours flew by as Grace walked him through the intricacies of running a business, from budgeting to expense tracking. She was patient, answering every question he had and breaking down complex concepts into manageable pieces. By the end of the day, Tom felt both exhausted and accomplished. "You're doing great," Grace said as they packed up for the day. "Most people would be overwhelmed by this much information, but you're handling it like a pro." "Thanks," Tom said, a faint smile on his face. "I've got a lot to learn, but I'm starting to see the bigger picture. It's exciting." Grace nodded. "That's the spirit. And remember, you're not alone in this. You've got me, and you've got the team. We're all here to support you." Tom felt a warmth in her words, a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. "I appreciate that, Grace. Really." That evening, Tom returned home to find Lily waiting for him by the window, her face pressed against the glass. As soon as she saw his truck pull into the driveway, she bolted to the door, flinging it open before he even had a chance to step inside. "Daddy," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his legs. "You're home." Tom laughed, scooping her up into his arms. "Of course I'm home, kiddo. Did you have a good day?" She nodded eagerly. "We made Christmas cards at school. I made one for the pie lady." Tom's heart swelled at her thoughtfulness. "That's sweet of you, Lily. I think she'll love it." They spent the rest of the evening decorating their tiny Christmas tree, stringing popcorn garlands, and hanging handmade ornaments. The room was filled with the sound of Lily's laughter and the soft hum of holiday music. For the first time in years, Tom felt a sense of peace, a feeling that everything was finally falling into place. The next morning, Grace stopped by the shop again, this time with an unexpected announcement. "Tom," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice, "I've been thinking about your progress, and I want to fast-track your training. You're already picking things up faster than I anticipated, and I think you're ready to take on more responsibility." Tom blinked, surprised. "Fast track? What does that mean?" Grace smiled. "It means I want you to start shadowing the manager at this shop full-time. Learn everything they do, from daily operations to long-term planning. The goal is to get you ready to take over a shop of your own within a few months." Tom's mind raced. The idea of running his own shop was both exhilarating and terrifying. "That's a big step," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "It is," Grace agreed, her tone steady. "But I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think you were ready. You've got the skills, the work ethic, and the heart for this. The rest is just experience. And that's what this shadowing program is for." Tom hesitated, his thoughts flickering to Lily. This opportunity could change everything for them, but it was also a lot to take on. "I don't want to let you down," he said finally. "You won't," Grace said firmly. "I believe in you, Tom. And more importantly, you should believe in yourself." Her words struck a chord, easing the doubts that had been creeping in. Tom nodded slowly, a determined look in his eyes. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, Tom threw himself into his training with renewed vigor. He spent long hours shadowing the shop's manager, soaking up every detail of how the business was run. He learned how to handle difficult customers, how to motivate a team, and how to make tough decisions. It wasn't easy, but every challenge felt like a step toward a brighter future. At home, Lily was thriving as well. With the financial strain eased, Tom was able to give her more of the little things she loved: art supplies, new books, even a small sled for the snowy hill near their house. Watching her happiness filled Tom with a sense of purpose, a reminder of why he was working so hard. As Christmas approached, Tom decided to invite Grace over for dinner, as Lily had suggested. He wasn't sure if she'd accept, but he felt it was the least he could do to thank her for everything she'd done. To his surprise, Grace accepted the invitation with genuine enthusiasm. "I'd love to," she said, "but only if I can bring dessert." Tom chuckled. "Deal. Just be warned. Lily's planning to bake you a pie." "I can't wait," Grace said with a laugh. On Christmas Eve, Tom and Lily worked together to prepare a simple but heartfelt meal. Their small kitchen was filled with the smell of roasted chicken and freshly baked pie, and Lily's excitement was palpable. When Grace arrived, she was greeted by Lily, who practically dragged her into the house. "Come see our tree," Lily exclaimed, pulling her toward the living room. Grace laughed, letting herself be led. "It's beautiful," she said, admiring the handmade decorations. "You two did a wonderful job." As they sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was warm and filled with laughter. Grace shared stories of her childhood, Tom spoke about his dreams for the future, and Lily kept them entertained with her endless energy. By the time dessert was served, Tom felt a sense of contentment he hadn't known in years. He looked around the table, his heart full of gratitude. Grace's kindness had not only given him a new lease on life, it had brought a sense of hope and possibility that he hadn't dared to believe in before. As the evening came to a close, Grace stood by the door, her arms full of leftovers and a small gift Lily had insisted she take. "Thank you for inviting me," she said, her voice soft. "This was one of the best Christmases I've had in a long time." "Thank you for everything, Grace," Tom said. "I wouldn't be here without you." "You would have found a way," Grace said, smiling. "You always do." As she drove away into the snowy night, Tom watched until her taillights disappeared, a deep sense of peace settling over him. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. And it was only the beginning. Building a legacy. The new year arrived with a sense of renewal, and Tom felt an energy within him that he hadn't known in years. The opportunity Grace had given him wasn't just a job. It was a second chance at life, one he intended to make the most of. He threw himself into his training with unwavering determination, embracing the long hours and new challenges. By February, Tom was ready to take over a shop of his own. Grace had chosen a smaller location in the chain for him to manage, a stepping stone that would let him grow into the role. When she handed him the keys, the weight of her trust hit him like a tidal wave. "You've earned this," Grace said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This shop is yours to run, to shape. I'm here if you ever need guidance, but I know you'll make me proud." Tom stared at the keys in his hand, a mix of pride and disbelief washing over him. "Thank you, Grace, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Grace smiled. "You did the work, Tom. I just gave you the chance." The shop quickly became a reflection of Tom's leadership. He treated his team with respect, listened to their concerns, and fostered a culture of trust and teamwork. Customers began to notice the change as well, praising the friendly atmosphere and reliable service. Tom's reputation grew, not just as a skilled mechanic, but as someone who genuinely cared. He wasn't just fixing cars, he was building relationships, and the community responded in kind. Business flourished, and for the first time in his life, Tom felt like he was truly succeeding. At home, life was better than ever. Lily had adjusted quickly to their new normal, delighting in the small luxuries Tom could now afford. Her laughter filled their home, a sound that never failed to lift Tom's spirits. One evening, as Tom tucked her into bed, Lily looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy, are you happy?" she asked, her voice soft. The question caught Tom off guard. He thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "I think I am, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "Because you smile more now," she said, nestling into her blanket. "I like it when you're happy." Tom leaned down and kissed her forehead. "That's because you make me happy, Lily. You always have." As he left her room, Tom felt a lump rise in his throat. He realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't weighed down by the fear of what tomorrow might bring. He was hopeful, and that hope was reflected in every aspect of his life. In March, Grace paid a visit to the shop, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. She nodded approvingly as she watched Tom interact with his team, his leadership style both firm and compassionate. "You've done an amazing job here," she said as they sat down for a cup of coffee in his small office. "The numbers are up, the reviews are glowing. It's everything I hoped for." "Thank you," Tom said, a note of pride in his voice. "But I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Grace shook her head. "Don't sell yourself short. You've turned this place into something special, Tom. It's not just a shop. It's a part of the community now." Her words struck a chord, and Tom found himself thinking about his next steps. He didn't want to just manage a shop. He wanted to leave a legacy, something Lively could look back on with pride. Spring brought new opportunities. Grace invited Tom to a leadership summit, an event that brought together business owners from across the region. Tom had never attended anything like it before, and the experience was both humbling and inspiring. He listened intently to the speakers, soaking up their advice and strategies. By the end of the summit, Tom had a notebook full of ideas and a renewed sense of purpose. He shared his vision with Grace on the drive back, his excitement spilling over. "I want to do more," he said, his hands gesturing animatedly. "Not just for the shop, but for the people. I want to start an apprenticeship program, something for kids who need a chance, like I did." Grace smiled, her eyes shining with admiration. "That's a wonderful idea, Tom, and I'll help you make it happen." In the months that followed, Tom and Grace worked together to bring the apprenticeship program to life. They reached out to local schools and community centers, offering opportunities for students to learn valuable skills and gain hands-on experience. The program was a success from the start, attracting young people who were eager to learn and grow. Tom took a personal interest in each apprentice, mentoring them with the same patience and encouragement Grace had shown him. He saw himself in many of them, kids who just needed someone to believe in them, and he was determined to be that person. By the time summer rolled around, Tom's shop had become a hub of activity. Customers came not just for the quality service, but for the sense of community that had blossomed there. The apprentices thrived under Tom's guidance, their progress a testament to his dedication. One afternoon, Grace stopped by unannounced, a rare look of vulnerability on her face. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, her voice quiet. "When I first met you, I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. Helping people is always a gamble, and I've been burned before. But you've proven me wrong in the best possible way." Tom was taken aback. "Grace, She held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "No, let me finish. You've not only turned your life around, but you've also changed the lives of everyone around you. You've inspired me, Tom. And for that, I'll always be grateful." Tom felt his throat tighten, his gratitude threatening to spill over. "You gave me the chance," he said finally, "and I'll never forget that." Grace smiled, her expression warm. "Then we're even." As the year progressed, Tom's vision continued to grow. He expanded the apprenticeship program to other shops in the chain, creating opportunities for even more young people. His success wasn't just measured in profits, it was measured in lives changed. Lily often visited the shop, her presence a constant reminder of why Tom worked so hard. She had grown into a bright, confident child, her laughter a beacon of hope. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily leaned against her father's shoulder. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft. "You're my hero." Tom wrapped an arm around her, his heart full. "And you're mine, sweetheart." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. His journey had been long and filled with challenges, but he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. He wasn't just building a future for himself and Lily, he was building a legacy. And for the first time, Tom truly believed that anything was possible. The legacy lives on. The warm summer breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass as Tom sat on the porch, his arm around Lily. The sound of crickets filled the air, blending with the faint hum of the shop's activity down the road. Life had taken a turn that Tom never imagined possible a year ago, and yet here he was, a man transformed, a father renewed. The shop had become a cornerstone of the community, its impact reaching far beyond car repairs. The apprenticeship program grew steadily, with several of the first apprentices now employed full-time. Tom often spent his evenings reviewing their progress and brainstorming ways to expand opportunities. Lily, always curious and eager to help, had become a familiar face around the shop. She loved listening to the stories of the apprentices, her youthful excitement lighting up the room. One of the young men, Chris, often shared how much the program had changed his life. "Mr. Tom," Chris said one day, his voice filled with gratitude, "I don't think I'd have made it without this program. You gave me more than a job. You gave me hope." Tom smiled, patting Chris on the shoulder. "You earned your place here, Chris. All I did was open the door. You walked through it." Grace remained a steadfast presence in Tom's life, their friendship deepening as they worked together to expand the program. They often met over coffee to discuss new ideas, their conversations flowing effortlessly. Grace had a way of pushing Tom to dream bigger, to believe in his ability to create lasting change. One afternoon, as they sat in her office, Grace leaned back in her chair and regarded Tom thoughtfully. "Have you ever thought about what's next for you?" she asked. Tom frowned slightly. "Next? I'm happy running the shop and the program." Grace nodded. "I know you are, but I think you're capable of more. What if you helped manage the entire chain? You'd have a hand in shaping all the shops, mentoring new managers, and growing the program even further." Tom's eyes widened. The idea was daunting, but it also sparked something inside him. "That's a big responsibility. You've proven you can handle it," Grace said with a smile. "And I'll be right here to help you." Tom hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "If you believe I can do it, then I'll give it everything I've got." As summer turned to autumn, Tom embraced his new role with the same determination that had carried him this far. He traveled between shops, meeting with managers and staff, ensuring that Grace's vision of community-driven success flourished. The apprenticeship program expanded to new locations, bringing hope to countless young people. At home, life was filled with joy. Lily thrived in school, her laughter a constant reminder of why Tom worked so hard. She often joined him on visits to the shops, her enthusiasm infectious. She had become a symbol of the program's success, a living testament to the power of opportunity and resilience. On a chilly November evening, Grace invited Tom and Lily to her home for dinner. It was the first time they'd visited her outside of work, and Tom was struck by the warmth of her home. It was elegant but inviting, filled with personal touches that spoke to Grace's character. "Welcome," Grace said, ushering them inside. "I hope you're hungry." Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of the beautifully set table. "Wow, this is so fancy." Grace laughed. "I wanted to make tonight special. You two have become like family to me." As they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily. They reminisced about their first meeting on the side of the road, marveling at how much had changed since then. "Do you ever think about how one small act of kindness started all this?" Grace asked, her tone reflective. "All the time," Tom admitted. "I didn't know fixing your car would lead to this, but I'm grateful every day that it did." "So am I," Grace said softly. "You've reminded me why I started all this in the first place, to give people a chance to thrive." After dinner, Lily presented Grace with a handmade card. "This is for you," she said shyly. "Thank you for helping my dad." Grace opened the card, her eyes misting as she read Lily's heartfelt message. "Thank you, Lily. This means more to me than you'll ever know." As the holidays approached, the shop staff and apprentices came together to organize a community event, a free car care clinic for families in need. Tom spearheaded the effort, pouring his heart into making it a success. The event drew a large crowd, and the gratitude of those they helped reinforced everything Tom had worked for. That night, as Tom and Lily drove home, she looked at him with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy, do you think people are happy because of what you do?" she asked. Tom smiled, his heart full. "I think so, sweetheart, and that makes me happy too." Years later, the apprenticeship program grew into a nationwide initiative, changing the lives of thousands. Tom's story became an inspiration, a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could spark something extraordinary. And through it all, Tom never forgot where it all began, with a broken-down car, a stranger in need, and a chance encounter that changed everything. His journey was proof that resilience, hard work, and a little faith could overcome even the toughest challenges. As Tom stood in his shop one crisp autumn morning, watching Lily, now a confident teenager, assist an apprentice with a repair, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had built more than a career. He had built a legacy, one that would carry on long after he was gone. And for the first time in his life, Tom knew that he and Lily had a future as bright as the morning sun.